Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tabled the country's budget for the year ahead. He had to walk a tightrope, balancing the need to stabilise public finances with the need to promote economic growth. What can be gleaned from the 2023 budget speech? Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by Dr. Miriam Altman from Altman Advisory. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Doc. And I suppose one of the big questions that are being debated at the moment is the credibility of the minister's budget speech. Let's start with your thoughts broadly on that, what you saw coming out of it and the level of credibility you felt came of it.
Well, there's two ways to see this. On the upside, I think that the minister has been much more forceful in saying, look, here's the budget. We've got to keep to an annual budget, and we're not going to be breaking into the kitty in the middle of the year. So he's been very forceful on that. Secondly, Treasury has done well in strengthening revenue services. And again, revenue services has saved the day, as has been happening pre-state capture and again now. So expenditure rose faster than, revenue rose faster than expenditure. The concerns that probably get raised, I've got maybe four. One is related to, when they're going to get to doing the multi-year wage agreements in the public sector. That is a huge risk to the budget still, and the minister pointed that out. Secondly, the strength of municipal management is a key threat to finance. Thirdly, SOE leadership, particularly of Eskom, of course, and particularly right now of the executive management, but generally to get the energy story moving. And then finally, what the final decisions are going to be around the income grant are still outstanding.
Yeah, you've mentioned quite a number of risks there, and I just want us to lament on the biggest one right now, which is Eskom. A government, as it had mentioned in the midterm budget policy statement, taking on about half of Eskom's debt so that it is able to focus on operations. That no doubt put a lot of extra pressure on our fiscus, and it really doesn't bode well for our debt servicing repayments and really where we'll reach a sustainable debt to GDP ratio. It's going to take us a little bit longer than anticipated because of that. What are your thoughts on that? And if you think that Eskom can actually come to the party and deliver on the investment that has been made once again by government?
Well, I think what was so interesting, firstly, the budget builds in the taking on of the debt. So, that is already in the budget. So that wouldn't be such a worry. The key question is your last question, which is will Eskom pull together to do what it needs to do is one side. And I think what was interesting is that Treasury was using a set of sticks and carrots, as it should, to say we will take on the debt, but we're going to sequence it around a series of reforms and performance improvements. And we're going to be containing what you're doing. So you should not be investing in new capacity unless you are strengthening your core function around transmission and distribution. And rather, we need to start getting private investment into generation, which actually is the policy of the day. And I think it just drives that faster. So one side of this is Eskom going to come to the party. Now, we know that there's a bit of a hiatus right now in relation to the top executive management. It's acting. So, as much as Caleb Kassim has been put in, he's acting. So we're going to need something convincing to turn the entity around and get the coal plants particularly moving, get the coal contracts unraveled and to the quality that they need to be so that the plants don't fail, that the independent transmission company is established and independent and operating as it needs to be, and the regulations are passed. They are in process, but have not yet been passed. Then there's a whole lot of stuff around, getting the wind projects that were meant to be approved in bid window 6, getting the transmission lines invested in, whether it's private or by Eskom, getting the embedded generation moving. I mean, I believe that there's about 9 gigawatts in the pipeline 100 projects in embedded generation, those need to move. So there are things that we need to be seeing moving, whether it's in Eskom or whether it's increasingly in the market.
Yeah, what we also need to see improve is the state of the municipalities. The minister did paint a picture of how dire the situation is there, and really just the need to build capacity. The municipalities that are in distress have increased quite significantly over the last few years, and so it's going to be quite the task for National Treasury to make sure that the budget allocations there are being utilised in the best way possible. What are your thoughts on that particular risk?
Yeah, no, it's a big risk, and it's the coal face of service delivery is an even bigger risk, and we're seeing deteriorating services across the board. The SICE report, the Engineering Society report on this matter, shows what's been happening in terms of the quality of municipal services and the availability or falling availability of municipal engineers. The key issue there, firstly, is that we have to remember that we have a system of local government that we have been developing. We didn't have a proper system of local government in 1994, just as a reminder to your viewers. And that was in development. So even around 2010, about a third of those municipalities were in financial distress. Now it's about 65% are in financial distress. And a very big reason for that is lack of revenue collection. Now, the key there, there's a lot of fantastic capacity development programs that are being driven by Treasury and COCTA, so we have to give them credit. But what really needs to happen is that COCTA's rules around the appointment of municipal managers are such that the top 5 or 6 are supposed to have certain kinds of capabilities. In other words, like the city manager, the CFO, that kind of role. And across the board, you'll find that they often don't, and that particular thing has not been done. Now, you can do as much capacity building as you want. You can install prepaid meters, which is great, but if you don't have that capability at the top of municipalities, especially the main ones where, there's actually a small number of municipalities where something like 70% of the population live. At least in those municipalities, we need to be seeing that kind of capability, and certainly much more attention to the engineering capability in the municipalities to maintain electricity, water services, and similar.
Yeah, that's right, Doc. And also, you mentioned this a little bit earlier in your response, but the public sector wage bill, a really, really sore point for government. It was not able to meet its obligations in the third and final year of the previous agreement. So now it appears that there is a draft agreement that the unions are going through, and government has committed to making sure that it meets the obligations that it will ultimately finalize with the unions. But they are frustrated, and they are asking for way above inflation increases, whereas government is committing to a certain amount. And I'm just wondering where the extra money to accommodate the union demands is going to be coming from for the next 3 years as they finalize that agreement.
Well, that's a very good question. What's been built into the budget right now is an average 3.3% increase, which, as anyone would know, is below inflation. So it means that on average salaries are falling. Having said that, when you look inside the budget, there have been increases at the bottom level. So the containment is more, at the top. So one might think there's some equity going on in there. Having said that, the 3-year agreement was broken up. It's understandable, or let's say reneged on. It's understandable the unions would be feeling angry about that. But what we have to be getting back to the idea that we were doing in the 1990s of instituting multi-year agreements. Now, I should say, pre-94, this was done on an annual basis. What was introduced in the 1990s was a multi-year agreement, and that's what needs to happen. And an alignment of the bargaining to the budgeting process. Of course, this is about a third of the entire budget. So now the problem is that it's done on an annual basis, and what we need is a long-term strategy for wages and remuneration, but also for performance, delivery, right job, right skill, right job. All of these kinds of things are needed. We need some kind of, I mean, if we had a social pact, this would be the place where we need a social pact, quite frankly.
Yeah. Doc, what are your thoughts on the social relief of distress grant? Now, there has been a lot of talk for it to become a permanent feature in terms of a basic income grant. Interestingly, the minister did not increase it. And so there are a lot of questions around the future of that particular grant. What do you make of the fact that it was left as is, and there wasn't really a direction on the future of this grant becoming a permanent feature of the budget?
Well, that's right. It was only budgeted for in the first year of the 3-year budget. I think it was about, I actually have the figure. I think it was about 30 billion or 36 billion is what it was in the first year. And then there was nothing budgeted for it in subsequent years. I suspect that at a minimum that, without inside knowledge on that particular thing, I suspect that will be the minimum of what carries forward. I would be amazed if something wasn't penciled in subsequent years. But it's a matter that has to get settled. The Department of Social Development has been doing a lot of work. There are reports on that offer options around it. So that again could add upwards of 75 billion to the 3-year budget easily.
Yeah, and I suppose as a final thought from you, Dr. Altman, is ultimately what government needs to be trying to do is create employment and economic growth. We're now being grey listed. There are a number of issues, including the fact that the commodity super cycle has tapered down. So the kind of revenue collection that we've seen over the last 2 fiscal years won't be the same going forward. And so there are difficult times ahead. And so your thoughts on just a medium-term outlook on the economy and the room to maneuver that government, in conjunction with National Treasury, will have to maneuver and really just create the best for households and businesses in the country?
Well, I know that there's a narrative that there isn't going to be a commodity boom, et cetera, et cetera. We have a lot, when you're in a difficult situation as we are currently, that is self-inflicted pretty much, we actually have a lot of room to instigate growth. Let me give you an example. The Reserve Bank put out a paper, they put in a recent circular, they said that load shedding, as it currently is now robbing the economy of 2% GDP growth. Now, that's within our power to fix. Previously, when they said what the impact of load shedding was when load shedding was less severe, they put that at 0.6%, that it was robbing GDP of 0.6%. Now, when you lose 2%, in other words, if growth is going, I don't know what it's going to be next year. Say, for argument's sake, I think Treasury suggests it's 0.9% growth, maybe. And the Reserve Bank thinks maybe it'll be 0.3, whatever it's going to be. So let's say Treasury is right. That means that growth would have been 2.9%. That's what the Reserve Bank is saying. Now, had that happened, that would have created 180,000 additional jobs in that year. When you multiply that by a number of years, year on year, you start to be creating a good number of jobs every year. It starts to make some of the requirements for a grant, for example, fall away. So, and other things. It is well within our power to be instigating higher rates of growth, higher rates of job creation, even when there isn't this commodity boom outside. These things are well within our control. Equally, if we could be getting exports moving through Transnet, if we could be managing water availability better, if we get the municipalities delivering, if we had more, I've been the lead drafter of the National Infrastructure Plan, so I've been watching this. We have a falling return to investment in infrastructure over a number of years. I would estimate that between 2010 and 2017, we probably forewent the creation of about 1 million jobs as a result of that. Now let's, let's not cry over spilt milk. Let's move forward. But those things are within our hands to fix. That's the good news. That isn't because of the Ukraine war or any other external factor. It's to do with things that are within our power to fix.
Very interesting insights, Doc. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That is Dr. Miriam Altman from Altman Advisory, speaking through some of the major risks that are pertinent within the national budget, and really saying that it is in our hands to remedy a lot of the crises that we currently find ourselves in.